Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. More than just mobile, it's technology that actually follows you. That's right. No longer tethered to a cubicle or even a bulky laptop, user experience management for the next generation physical and virtual desktop has arrived. The industry's first on-ramp to virtualizing desktop infrastructure is now a reality. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, February 15, 2011, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. The explosion of disruptive digital mobile devices and the inroads into mainstream enterprise workers as the world of business is porting the standard PC into virtual machines. This edition of Tech Talk takes an in-depth look into the transformation and optimization of the virtual desktop, no longer Windows-centric. Tino speaks with J. Tyler T-Rex Rohrer, Chief Revenue Officer and founder of the Atlanta-based Liquidware Labs, as we explore the architecture of stateless virtual desktops and the virtual use of any device to retain the look and feel of your very own desktop. The leader in assessment and user experience management, Liquidware Labs' comprehensive solutions enabled organizations to cost-effectively plan, migrate, and manage next-generation desktop infrastructure. Tyler, a founder of Liquidware Labs, is considered by experts as a leading economist, technologist, futurist, and theoretical physicist. His progressive leadership and perspective and counsel on advanced applications, architecture, and desktop virtualization and cloud computing are sought after by the largest corporations in the world. Managing user desktop environments with virtual desktop infrastructure, how advanced virtualization is transforming once neat gadgets into futuristic next-generation enterprise power tools, as Tino Tech Talks with Liquidware Labs founder and CRO, J. Tyler, the T-Rex Rohrer.
Tyler, thank you for joining me on Tech Talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure to be here.
Why don't we start out for our listening audience to talk a little bit about Liquidware Labs. Tell us what the company does and what you're focused on today.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And so Liquidware Labs is a Windows tools and utilities company that focuses on this notion of desktop transformation. It's our belief that the way we've done the desktop for the last 20 years or so might not necessarily be the way that we do the desktop over the coming years and decades, and so that's what we're very focused on.
So you're implying then that you're going to see a major change in let's call it next generation desktops?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's something that we've probably become very aware of in the last probably 2 or 3 years, and now we're actually seeing some pretty decent traction out there across the market. And so, in essence, what we're saying is that for the past 20 years or so, we've been, I don't want to use the term spoiled, but we've become very familiar with a kind of Windows-centric, Intel-centric view of desktop computing. And if you think about it, we kind of evolved from typewriters into this thing called the PC, and really for 20 years or so, the way that we delivered those PCs to our end users, the way that we managed them, the way that we kind of looked for troubleshooting and problem remediation was very common, and so a lot of the tools that we used, we all became very familiar with. And now what we're seeing, we believe, is this kind of next-generation desktop architecture, if you will. We're seeing things like, Apple iPads in the enterprise, smartphones, Google Android on tablet devices, and now, of course, the conversation in most times, in most places, includes some mention of the cloud. What
right.
exactly is the cloud, and how does it, apply to how we do the desktops?
Well, there's a lot of challenges, I guess, in getting anyone to move from what they're comfortable with to that next generation. We like to call that disruptive technology. So would you say that you're in the disruptive technology business, and what kind of, if we said the top 3 challenges companies face in moving to that technology?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I think what we believe we do is we contribute to the notion of visibility and the notion of portability. And so when you think about some of those problem propositions that you just mentioned, one of the things that we believe, we solve is visibility before you even consider which one of these disruptive technologies you want to bring into your enterprise. So whether it's cloud or whether it's application virtualization or whether it's desktop virtualization or an alternative computer device, like a tablet or a thin client. We believe that, something that's very important is to have a degree of visibility into exactly what your users have, what have you provisioned out to them, and exactly what are they consuming. Now, that's kind of moving part number 1, and we think a very important part. But moving part number 2, is this notion of portability. When you think about it, over the last, like I said, 20 years or so, about 600 million PCs deployed in and around enterprise, departments across the world, really. And they're very happy where they are. They don't want to move. They're really comfortable working on Windows XP, And so one of the things we think, comes into play is how do you actually move the stuff that you care about to where you want it to go? Did that make sense?
Yeah, but bring to life more for our audience what that might look like in the real world then. I mean, so I'm at my desk now. I'm sitting in front of a laptop. May have some type of an iPad device. But what's that next generation going to be, and how do you guys play into that?
Well, that's a great question as well, and I think of it this way. When I look at today or legacy-wise, what actually makes up a PC, it's really kind of 5 simple moving parts, even though we've made it very complex over the last couple decades. It's kind of my profile. It's what makes my laptop or my desktop uniquely my own. It might be my auto signatures or my browsing history. It might be my backdrop picture. It's the settings and configurations that either myself or my desktop administrator have determined are important to do that. And so that's one of the moving parts. But then I use that moving part to move on to the second silo, which is data. I believe that we as users of technology really do one of 2 things. We either create content or we consume content. And so a lot of that content for the last 20 years has lived on our local hard drives, and I think now there's some interesting ways to not necessarily have to have it that way, whether it's cloud storage or shared storage resources in a data center. That data can now be abstracted or moved off of that endpoint, which we've called a PC for a long, long time. And I think the next moving part are the applications that we use. When I think about applications, for the most part, that laptop you're sitting at or the desktop that I'm sitting here at today, the applications are installed. It's something that's physically installed on that device.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that's even the way things continue. We see things like the Android marketplace or the Apple iStore or the application stores, the iTunes of the world. Are those more interesting models to get applications so that you and I can create or consume data? Now, the next interesting layer of the cake is operating systems. And again, for 20 years, Wintel was kind of the standard, and Microsoft was great to create a standard for us that made our lives very consistent and kind of easy to work within. And I think the last probably 2 years, maybe 3 years, we've seen, I would call it an explosion of alternative operating systems. You have all of these new smartphones with different operating systems, whether they're from BlackBerry or Microsoft or Google or Apple. And so I think most IT departments today are confronted with this notion that out of those 5 moving parts, a lot of those are not going to be, the same as they were for the past 20 years. And so I think you were right on in mentioning that this is extremely disruptive and sometimes a challenge to make heads or tails out of it. That's what we do at Liquidware Labs. We make software that provides visibility that hopefully allows you to move in those directions in more elegant ways.
Do you have some early adopters of your products and services that maybe even give a couple examples of how people are starting to use it?
Sure. I mean, so a great example would be, we work with some of the larger organizations here in the United States that might be focused on, let's say, home products or large retailers. When they're looking at even small changes, let's say they've got 80,000 users or 100,000 users in their enterprise, even adopting technology for 5% of that user population means that 5,000 people, are now going to change the way that they do desktop. And so as they're out there exploring the different technologies that they might bring to bear, whether they're from VMware, whether from Citrix, whether they're from Microsoft, or now there's new solutions coming out from the likes of Cisco, EMC, NetApp. There's some big players and big platforms out there that have new solutions that allow some of these organizations to do desktop in a slightly different way. Their big question is, well, what's going to work for me? What's going to work for those 5,000 users that I've kind of isolated and determined I'm interested in delivering in new ways? And so really Liquidware Labs and our early adopters are companies that use these tools, use these solutions that we offer to the market, use our technology to help make that journey, that transformation, if you will, a bit more elegant. And so from a visibility and a portability standpoint, that's what our software does. And we've learned a lot, from, I think it's been just about 2 years since we launched the company. We've had the good fortune of counting quite a few, large enterprises as our early adopters, so it's something we're very proud of.
And what's the profile in Atlanta in terms of, in Georgia, in terms of employees, and how long have you been in business? I know I have some different locations.
Yeah, so we've got presence in a couple of different major, geographies, with Atlanta being the hub. I mean, that's really mission control center. And it's a wonderful place, we found, to do business, from the universities and the education system to just the quality and quantity of great candidates and smart people. It's really a great place to start a technology company, in our opinion. And really the history of Liquidware Labs goes back about 2 years, but really the history of the software that we use to found Liquidware Labs goes back, almost a decade. And that was all kind of homegrown right down there in the general Atlanta, Alpharetta market. And so, we've had the good fortune, I guess, to have a neat place like Atlanta to call home. Now, the other, points of presence, as you might imagine, circle around, the larger geographic areas of density, which is, New York, up in Chicago, and now we're exploring, branching out into the West Coast as well. Large presence down in Texas as well.
Well, we're happy you're here, and as you say, mission control, we're happy to have that in Atlanta, and I know our listeners always like to hear that companies are established here and there's enough talent here, and, of course, we have the airport and all other kinds of things working for us, so we appreciate hearing that, though. I have time for one more question, and I ask you to kind of look at the crystal ball for a second and say, what do you see happening in this space, say, in 2011, 12, 13, so for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, I wish I had the perfect crystal ball, but there's some definite trends that we see and some definite momentum heading in several different ways. And I think one of the main takeaways that we wrestle with daily is, a world in which the modern enterprise, the modern desktop architecture, the modern desktop topology in most of the large enterprise customers is not going to be as Windows-centric as we've thought and seen for the past 20 years. And it's really, no fault of Microsoft. It's more revolving around just the explosion of new device options that have gone from kind of neat gadgets into, tools that actually solve real problems. It's funny, I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Manhattan 2 weeks ago and actually forced myself to leave my laptop in my laptop bag and went and did 3 full days of meetings only using a tablet computer. And it was interesting. I had full and really unfettered access to email. I had the ability to, do browser searching and use the Internet. I had the ability to present some of the PowerPoints I needed to present and some great, technology that allowed me to take notes from all the meetings. And it was interesting. None of those solutions were, Microsoft-centric. And so one of the kind of predictions I guess I would make is that, the evolution of these devices from being neat gadgets that, some really radical early adopters would use to being tools we see adopted more and more frequently in the enterprise, that's certainly something that I would predict. I think, the second thing that we see is that from an operating standpoint, what we're learning is, if I'm a road warrior or if I'm any user within an enterprise, there's a tremendous amount of power that comes from being able to do my work, either consume content or create content on any device at any time, in any place. And so that I think freeing up of IT, that I don't need to only deliver technology to someone's cubicle, that the technology really follows us around during the course of our days. And what we find is, we're more productive users if we're able to use that technology and adopt that technology. So, obviously we like being at the crossroads of that. We like making, tools that help with the visibility and the portability of users as they head in that new direction. But it's a pretty exciting time. I think that for the last, 20 years, we've learned an awful lot about what users need to do, and now a lot of these large platforms are creating these new devices and new application delivery methods and new clouds, if you will. It's a pretty exciting time.
Well, Tyler, congratulations on the success of the company, and we'll be keeping an eye out for you and maybe have you back on in a year or so. But best of luck, and thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.